Here are some tips for caring for young plumeria. First, here's a look at different plumeria at different stages in their growth. So the plumeria on the right, so the four on the right here, they're about a year old, and you can see that they've been growing at different rates. This one right here, it's in a gallon pot and it's almost a foot tall. And this one right here, it's in a quart pot and it's also about a year old, but it's growing much more slowly than this. So just like people, plumeria grow at different rates, and some are bigger than others. And then this plumeria here, this is 3 years old, so it's roughly 3 feet tall, and it hasn't produced any flowers yet. Tip number 1. During the winter, place your plumeria plants against the side of your house. This will protect it from too much rain, so you want to place it under an area that's protected from the rain. So for example, there's a slight overhang here, so it keeps the plumeria plants, the young plumeria plants, from getting too much water. Also, placing the plants against the house keeps them warm when it gets cold at night. So for example, where I am in Southern California, the temperatures can drop to below 50 and possibly below 40 at night. But against the side of the house, they get heat from the house, and then also heat that's been trapped by this concrete during the day. Tip number 2. During the summer, place the plumeria plants somewhere shady or in a spot that gets partial sun. This is because you don't want the plants to dry out too quickly. For example, these plumeria seedlings, some of these are actually rooted branches, but most are seedlings. They're under a larger plumeria plant here, and so the larger plant provides shade during the afternoon, but doesn't obstruct the morning light in the morning. Tip number 3. Up-pot your plumeria plants gradually. When the plant is a couple inches tall like this, keep them in a 1 quart container is fine. And then when they approach a foot tall, or about maybe 8 inches tall, you can move into a gallon-sized container like this. And then if it's several feet tall, like this one right here, this is about 3 feet, you can move it into a larger container, such as this 3-gallon container. This is important because plumeria plants, they don't like sitting in damp soil for too long. This can cause stem rot. So keeping the plumeria in a container for its size will help prevent that. For example, this small plant, it will dry out more quickly, and that's fine because this plant doesn't have that many roots, and so it's not going to soak up a lot of water. Whereas this plant, which is more established, it will need more water, and so it will need more space for the roots to collect that water. And so you want to give it more space. If I were to keep this plant right here in a container this size, it would soak up the water really quickly, and I have to water it fairly often, and the soil would stay dry for too long, and so that's bad. But if I were to place this small plant in a container this size, the soil would stay wet for several days, and the plant would sit in the water, and this would cause stem rot, especially during the winter months when it's cold. So make sure that you up-pot the plants gradually, depending on their size. Tip number 4. Make sure you give your plumeria seedlings the right amount of water. That is, when you stick your finger in the soil and the top 1 inch is dry, then you can water it. But if it's moist, it doesn't need water. So for example, this right here, the top 1 inch, I feel it's kind of wet, and the soil, it's still kind of clumped together, so that means this plumeria right here doesn't need water. Whereas this one right here, you see the soil is loose, and it kind of comes away easily when I stick my finger in it, and then 1 inch down it feels dry. This plant right here needs water. Tip number 5. place your plumeria seedlings in a spot that's easy for you to check up with them on a regular basis. The reason for this is because plumeria seedlings, like other young plants, they need a little more care than established plants. So we want to make sure that they're getting enough water, the leaves aren't drying out, the stems are nice and firm. So you might check for pest, any spiders. You want to make sure that the leaves are nice and healthy. And this is much easier when you're looking at them often. Tip number 6, be patient for blooms. You shouldn't expect your plumeria plants to bloom in the first year or even the second year. It can take 3 years or longer for plumeria plants to produce flowers. For example, this plant right here, it's in its 3rd year and hasn't produced any flowers yet, and this is not too uncommon. This is contrast with rooted cuttings or grafted branches, which can produce flowers almost immediately or in the first year. So be patient for the flowers to appear. You can apply fertilizer on a regular basis. Fertilizer that you would acquire for flowering plants.